Yeah, good morning, Graham. I was just turning back there to switch the streaming on. Sort of, you need to be completely able to swivel in this radio room. I see the pictures of modern radio rooms when everything is laid out with big screens in front of you, and I get quite envious. But at least I can look out on beautiful sunshine. Go ahead, Toranui. Oh, that's good. Yeah, it looks as if it's mostly moved past you, and in fact, it looks like it. Haven't heard a report from Falanga this morning, but it looks like it's mostly terrorising the Lao group and to the east of you folk. But you would have got a significant amount of rain the last day or two, over. Yeah, it's never one thing but the other. All right, thank you for that, and good morning to everybody that's joined us here on Gulf Harbour Radio, ZMH 286. Patricia and David, we're on air Monday to Friday, and if you need us at all, our email address is ghradio@extra, which is xtra.co.nz, and thank you for those people who have let us know where you are and what you're doing, because otherwise we just do the main island groups, and in this case passage weather to New Zealand, and a couple of boats are heading into Newcastle. So if you're doing something a little bit different, let us know and we'll include that. Actually, I will let you know if people have got a pencil handy, if you want to know the anchorage at South Minerva. Flying Fish is at South Minerva waiting for passage weather to New Zealand. He doesn't want to arrive with the nasty weather on Friday, Saturday. And the boat Let's Go, good morning to you guys, returned. They had got south of South Minerva but decided to return very wisely to avoid what they were going into. Pizzazz is still on their way to New Zealand, but they're going to get in Thursday night, so they're okay. But the Flying Fish position at the moment at South Minerva, for those who are interested, 23 degrees, 56.20 south, and 179er, 5 degrees, 53 west, and they've got southeast 14 at the moment, 20% cloud cover, 1016. We haven't been into South Minerva, we've always gone into north, but I think it's a little bit sloppier there. Jeffrey reported that the sea's breaking 1.5 metres over the reef at the moment, so I think it's a little bit more rolly in there than it is at North Minerva. Anyway, David will of course be covering your weather, guys, so listen up at the time. A little bit more news from here. We have an absolutely glorious day, 13 degrees. Well, of course you're not going to be impressed with that, but it's crystal clear blue sky, 1022.7. No, take that back, 1021.4 and rising, 1021.4 and rising, 2 knots of southwesterly, and as I say, it's just an absolutely glorious morning. So we're going to plan on walking the beach later on. Anyone who comes to visit us should bring their walking feet, because we're up above about 200 feet up in the air on the ridge, but we overlook, is it 200 metres or 200 feet? 200 metres, I suspect. And we overlook a bay, and it's a lovely walk around it at low tide. Bit of news for you. I briefly mentioned yesterday the Bathurst race, which is a very, very important supercar race in Australia. What I didn't mention, because I didn't have time, was that the lead driver, David Reynolds, had to pull out with dehydration. Very interesting situation. He completely, his right leg, which of course is rather important for braking and acceleration, just froze up. He couldn't do anything about it. Clearly he has not been drinking enough gin and tonics. but I thought I would mention it because when we did the Hawaii race one year, this is San Francisco to Hawaii, I was actually the radio person to do that. In fact, it was an interesting one because it was the test run for Sail Mail. It was the beta run, had been released, and we used it on that race to report everything. So that was Sail Mail, and that was 1998. So 20 years ago, Sail Mail has been going, 20 years. Anyway, to get back to the story, the weather wasn't all that great for getting speed, and one of the boats was a bit slow, and one of the people on board ended up, well, he was the navigator on this boat, unfortunately, and he collapsed, and they were very worried about him. What turned out to be the case was just dehydration. They had started to run out of water. He had stopped drinking much, and on top of that, we discovered he was on furosemide, which is a drug you take for getting water out of the body. So we stopped him taking that for sure. But you have to be careful on passage, even shorter passages, to make sure you do have plenty of liquid. I know if you're not feeling well, and I'm a great one for getting seasick. So if you're seasick, it's very hard to keep taking water in because you know it's going to come back again, but it is quite important. So remember that on passage to make sure you keep your fluids up. The other reason for doing that, of course, is to help with constipation, because if you are on seasick medication, and boy, do I know about seasick medication. If you want to know about any seasick medication, let me know, because I've tried them all. But that does tend to make you constipated. So again, if you take your sufficient number of fluids in, then that will help that situation. All right, on to things that are happening around the world. 20 people yesterday were killed in a limousine accident in the state of New York. Absolutely gruesome accident. It was they're all adults, sort of close to 30. They were going to a birthday party, did the right thing, hired a limousine. It was about 250 k's northwest of New York, between Albany and Syracuse there. The car, which had failed inspection as it turned out, and the driver wasn't licensed to do this, but he went straight through a T intersection, crashed into a parked car, ended up in the bushes, killing everybody on board. There were 18 on board and 2 pedestrians that were where he ended up crashing. So a really gruesome crash in upstate New York. Still in the United States, another hurricane is heading towards the panhandle there. It's called Michael. Doesn't seem right having these hurricanes called by male names, but anyway, Michael is the 13th named storm of the 2018 season. It's in the Yucatan Peninsula at the moment, heading to Cuba, the western side of Cuba, before it carries on. There was an interesting, for art lovers, there was an interesting Banksy situation. This was a few days ago, but it wasn't sort of top of my news thing until to tell you about it today. But there was this auction, very important auction, and this very well-known painting from Banksy. It was the little girl in black holding a red balloon, a heart-shaped balloon. It's quite a famous one of his. And the auction was held. The painting sold for $1.4 million US. And at the sound of the gong, the painting ran itself through a shredder that had been embedded in the frame. So it was quite interesting. Absolutely stunned the art world, of course. And after that, Banksy actually issued a video showing how he put the shredder in the frame. It was quite a heavy goldish frame, and he did not want the painting ever to be auctioned, and so it was set up so that if it ever did get auctioned, it would automatically shred itself. So they reckon now, because only the top part of the painting is the balloon is left and the girl is gone shredded. So there you have it. Yeah. All right. So we've got lots of weather to do today, so I'm going to probably finish this a little bit earlier. But I did want to comment. There's been a couple of people ask about Norfolk Island as a place. Now, Norfolk Island is, of course, en route if you're coming from Vanuatu or New Caledonia to New Zealand, but it is not the haven that Minerva Reef is for people coming from Tonga or the eastern side of Fiji. It's the anchorages at Norfolk are all roadstead anchorages. It's almost, unless it's absolutely flat, calm, and there's a big high sitting there forever, you really can't leave your boat. Someone needs to be on the boat. But there is plenty of information about it on the websites. If you go to ours, ghradio.co.nz, we have the official issuing of, because it's under Australia now, so you do have to have a visa if you are not Australian or New Zealand, and that includes, according to them, people who just want to anchor. So you can read the official word on our website. You can also see a picture of the new dock. They have two docks, one at the bottom, which unfortunately is in the prevailing weather, so it's quite hard to get ashore there, but it's very interesting because it's around the historical area. But there's another one at Cascade Bay that only opened this year, so that's quite pleasant if you're around that side. At least you can get your dinghy ashore. But also on the YIT site, if you wade down through the forum items, we were there a couple of years ago. We did not go there in the boat, we flew there, and I took pictures of all the anchorages because we happened to be there in beautiful weather. So they're on an article that one of the boats that was going to Australia stopped in there and did a good forum on the YIT site article on Norfolk Island, things that you might want to know about the different anchorages, and I've put the photos in there. So there's plenty of information if you want to pre-arm yourself with a bit of knowledge on Norfolk Island. Have a look at those two websites and you'll get a feel for things. But if you are not Australia or New Zealand passport holders, then you do have a little bit of a problem there. And quite frankly, if you're coming from UCAL, you're not going to really want to muck around. And that's what the case was with us all the time. If you've got decent weather to carry on, you'll carry on, because otherwise things could change. But it is an option sometimes if you're caught out. So keep that in mind. All right, I'm just going to pause and see if there's anything urgent, and then I think we'll pass the microphone to David because there's a lot of weather to cover this morning. Is there anything urgent?
Golf Harbor,
Seeker, good signal from you. Go ahead. Seeker, go ahead.
Good morning, Patricia. This is Peter aboard Seeker, and we are adapted from Australia to Newcastle.
Goodness, you're going in a strange direction at this time of the year. All right, Australia to Newcastle. How far have you got? Over.
Okay, we departed Mackay, Australia last Friday morning, and we are currently at 2301 south, 159 QAE. We decided to do a little bit of an uphill slog back to Newcastle. And we're a little over halfway to Noumea.
Okay, we've got you halfway to Noumea. I've got a good copy on your exact position. So David will probably comment on that later. Nothing much to comment on, is it? He'll probably cover that after the weather. So Peter, just stand by for after that. We'll get these other people first just to make sure that propagation. Obviously, you're copying me pretty well on that side. Have you got good copy on me? Over.
There's quite a bit of noise, Patricia, but I can hear you.
What's his ETA?
What is your ETA, Peter? ETA Noumea.
It'll be sometime Thursday night or Friday morning.
Okay, Thursday night, Friday morning. Thank you. That will help David here. All right. I just want to go back to the rest of the folk to see that they're copying me all right. There is a bit of noise around, but I think unless it's horrible, we'll stay on 8752. And then if people need any repeats, we'll move around after David is finished. Is there any particular problem with 8752? Please call. I've got a very light person, but I can't copy you. Is there any relay? Yeah, I can't copy you now, Graham. I've got the Toranui, but that's about all. Oh, thank you very much. South Minerva's copying us loud and clear. That's perfect, what we want to know. All right, here's David.
Okay, good morning, everyone. And looking at the usual 500 millibar, we've got a shortwave trough axis found at 165 west, so it's out there a bit, with a ridge just to the west of there. The axis of the ridge is roughly just a wee bit east of the dateline. Then we've got another shortwave trough that lies over New Zealand, and that's followed by a ridge. So the surface synoptic chart follows along pretty nicely with what I've just given you. Remember, the upper levels are what controls everything that happens on the surface. And the depression that everyone is talking about at the moment is currently at about 32 and 160 west. That's the one that passed through New Zealand and is throwing up some pretty good swells in the direction of the eastern islands. It's going to be out of the way pretty soon. Anyhow, a high sits under the eastern ridge, and that's of more importance to the yachts that are on passage. It's fairly, well, it's a 1022 millibar high, so I just call it a moderate strength high. But underneath it, not under it, but to the south of it, there are a series of depressions that, well, they're south of 40 south, and a whole group of them are running west to east. Now, the only effect for us regarding those depressions are the seas that they're generating. Right now, we're looking at about 3 meters coming from the southwest if you're on the cruising route itself in between the islands and New Zealand. Now, by Friday, we could expect 5 meter seas, that's a 5, in the Tasman, and they extend up to about 30 south. In fact, in the mid-Tasman, for your interest, there's an area there that the seas are projected to be 7 meters, 7-meter swells, but those are going to be pretty much south of 35 south, so those size swells are not going to be up to affect you on your passage. Fortunately, that's pretty nasty. Now, yachts that are approaching New Zealand this coming Saturday are going to be looking at probably 4 meters from about 28 south to 33 south, right in that little narrow range right there. But then from there, from 33 south to New Zealand, because of the way the land is oriented, New Zealand itself, the seas will drop to about 3 meters. And they're still going to be coming from the southwest. And 3 meters is not unusual for the Southwest Pacific. It's quite a common actual height, if you will. It's only when there's a wind behind it and they start breaking that it gets pretty annoying. And that's not the case at the moment. Now let's quickly look at the winds this week from, say, Fiji to New Zealand. Based on the current model runs, and these are the most recent runs that I picked up very early this morning. Now, a bunch of you had left yesterday, so by lunch today, those that left Fiji are going to be in the 20 south area, and you could expect southeast 10 knots or so. Not much air really down at that latitude. And of course, if you're underneath a fairly good-sized cloud, you'll get higher gusts. But these are just mean winds. Now by Thursday, as you're plugging along at 25 south, you're going to encounter pretty light and variable winds, probably a motor, I would say, on Thursday if you're down there at 25. On Friday at 27 south, you'll be finally in the cyclonic flow of the next depression that's going to be over New Zealand. So all of the winds are going to be essentially clockwise winds, and that, of course, is what I mean when I say you're caught up in the cyclonic flow of the system. Now, by Saturday, the depression is going to be just to the east of the North Island, so it's going to scoot through fairly smartly. At 30 south, if you're heading, not quite there yet, if you're at 30 south, then expect southerly quadrant winds, unfortunately, and they're going to be probably about 25 knots or so. So on the nose, I'm afraid, and pretty sloppy. On Sunday, the winds are going to start to back anyhow, perhaps south to south-southeast, and they'll be 15 to 20 knots. And by Monday, if you're closing on Cape Reinga, you can expect south to southeast about 10 to 15. That's if we're lucky and this low carries on as we think it's going to do. So that's the outlook for those that are underway at the moment. Now, for those that are waiting to leave later this week, we've gotten a number of emails from folk who are looking to leave Friday. You know, us old-timers here, we can really tell there's a new generation out there. Absolutely not one of us, I don't think, would leave on a Friday. Yep, would you? Would you leave on a Friday? No.
Not after the last time we did.
No, the boss wouldn't do it. And so there you go. The new generation just doesn't care about these old, very, very accurate predictions of bad news on Friday. Anyhow, if you do go, and the tail end of the depression that we just talked about, that is over New Zealand at that time, is going to have, if it doesn't have any significant effect on Fiji, in other words, not much comes of it, and you are underway, the wind should be more or less southeast, I would say light to moderate. So this is Friday of this coming week, possibly the tail end of the next depression is going to be affecting Fiji, but from the looks of it, there's not a whole lot in it. So if you decide to go, then off you go. But at that time, we discover a rather strong 500 millibar ridge that's building an enormous high over the Tasman. Now, we're looking at possibly 1038 millibar, 1038. Now, normally that's a big red flag. That would be the end of it for us, as we'd be looking at certainly a trade wind surge up in the islands with 30 to 35 knots on the perimeter, and that, of course, is bringing showers because the wind tends to bunch up at that time. And usually there's the fear of a depression on the northwest corner, et cetera, et cetera. All of you by now have learned to pay attention to deep highs. Well, what may happen is we could be looking at a block. Now, yes, this high may actually remain in place, possibly through the 20th, maybe 22nd of October. So that would allow a quite interesting passage to New Zealand. If this is so, all of you should be quite happy that have waited all this time. All of this, though, is really a bit too distant to be sure, and there is only one model that reaches out that far. So we need a little bit of patience on this. Now, one bit of promising news for you is that I look quite frequently at the blocking forecast. There are a number of sites that talk about atmospheric blocks, and from what I can see, there appears to be a block at that time, and that means we could get our wish from between the 19th and through the 2nd of the month. So that means if you go on Friday or maybe even Saturday, you could get into New Zealand all within the circulation of this anticyclone. So when I first looked at it, I had thought, oh, there's no way this is going to happen. Looking at other models, they don't go out that far, needless to say, but looking at how far they do go out, a few of them are picking up a depression actually forming on the western side of this particular large high, but they tend to stick more toward the Queensland coast. They tend to run up and down Queensland, and that's common too. So if, in fact, that happens, that's not going to have an effect for those coming to New Zealand. It would if you're going to Australia, but not if you're coming to New Zealand. So what we'll do is we'll keep an eye out on this. Friday is a couple days away, so we'll look at it again tomorrow. And, of course, we'll look at it on Thursday as well before you actually leave and see if things are still looking pretty much the same. But this is a good possibility. All right, quickly, let's look at the tropics, where there is a trough that runs from the Louisiades, goes right through Vanuatu again, another one from the Solomons, that's the hot pool area of the Western Pacific. That runs right through Fiji and on to Tonga. Yet another one, another trough forms over Tuvalu, goes past Wallis, and then it goes to another tropical disturbance. And that's located near 12 and 170 west. That's 12 south, 170 west. And I'm looking at it right now on satellite imagery, and it is a very red spot is the best way to describe it. And of course, red is indicating very, very high ice clouds. And that, to me, is talking about groups of cumulonimbus clouds that are forming and getting bigger. Now, to give you an idea of the size of this, the diameter, if you will, of this system, I would say it's about 4 degrees wide. So that's over 240 nautical miles. So it's huge. And whether or not that develops into anything, we'll have to wait and see. But right now, it is, in fact, a tropical disturbance. Okay, moving over to Tonga. As I mentioned, we do have a trough. Actually, there are 2 troughs that are affecting the group. One a little bit to the north, that's affecting New Potatoes, and the other one that's affecting the main group itself. So you can expect cloudy periods with scattered to isolated showers, and virtually the same thing tomorrow, I think. Expect east to southeast winds, I would say about 10 to 15 knots up around New Potatoes, that's Nui Tuputapu, and south to southeast winds for the main group itself. And tomorrow, for the main group, also east-southeast winds, I would say around 15 knots. So that includes Vavau down to Tongatapu. Over to Fiji now, where, well, yeah, we've got an annoying and persistent trough that's lying over the group. And yes, there are breaks. And you, if you happen to be under one of these, it's nice, lovely sunshine, and you're wondering what's going on. But if you were to look at satellite imagery, you would see the trough quite clearly. That is bringing rain and thunderstorms to those areas that are underneath this, and you could expect that to continue tomorrow. And it will be in various, it'll move around. Some areas will get the bulk of it today, others tomorrow. So it just, the clouds keep moving basically from the west to the east or northwest to southeast, that sort of thing. Now, Fiji Met has issued a heavy rain warning, and that's still in place. They had that going yesterday. It's still in place for Viti Levu, Pindavu, Loma Viti, and the southern Lao group. Quite a bit of rain in this for those areas, so be careful there. The mean winds, however, aren't bad. I would expect east to southeast about 15 to 20 today and tomorrow. About the biggest hazard is going to be poor visibility that's in the rain. And of course, if you happen to be under a thunderstorm, Those gusts could be quite ornery, getting up to 30, 35 knots, and the winds can change up to 180 degrees in these downflows, so watch out for that. Okay, over to Vanuatu. Basically the same story there. We've got a trough that's affecting the group. There are broken areas, looking at imagery, just like in Fiji, but overall expect cloudy periods with scattered showers for the group. The winds are fairly light there as well, east to southeast, about 10 to 15 in the mean, and that of course depends on your location today. Now tomorrow, looking at probably southeasterlies, and they'll be in the 15 knot range as well, and of course higher gusts. And to NewCal finally, imagery does show cloud this morning, and that cloud is moving northwest to southeast, not particularly threatening. There are no real ice clouds that I could see. The colors on the returns are basically whitish in color, a little bit of green in it, so that's indicating fairly low cloud. And there's a little bit of rain in it, but not much at all for NewCal. So it looks pretty good. Now, the winds for the lagoon quite light, east to southeast, 10 knots, and north of Noumea, it will change a little bit more to the southeast in that area. Tomorrow, expect easterlies for the lagoon, still pretty light air, and I would say in the 10 knot mark. Noumea, if you happen to be up there, a little bit more wind, about 15 knots, and mostly southeast up there tomorrow as well. Now, the lagoon winds today are going to pick up to about 15 by this afternoon. That's not much at all. So if you are out in the ELOs, it shouldn't be too bad for you. Now, Thursday, we may see a little bit of backing. I would say east to maybe east-northeast, about 10 to 15 knots. So that is in the southern lagoon. And, well, lastly, I guess we're looking at Minerva Reef. We have a little mini fleet there now, waiting to get to New Zealand. And that passage is about 4 days, roughly, from Minerva to the Opua or Marsden area. And it's going to be a tricky one to call, folks. The winds are not going to be particularly strong. You're going to want to wait, of course, for the depression over New Zealand to clear. But the only issue with that is when it does clear, the winds that are behind it are going to be southerly quadrant winds. So you're faced with that, I'm afraid. So getting to New Zealand is going to be just one of those affairs where you're going to be doing a fair amount of tacking. There's not much you could do about that. The only thing that you could wish for is that the high starts to move in a little bit quicker than forecast so that the wind's back a little bit more for you. But at least the bad weather will have gone, and all you have to worry about is tacking, which is everybody's favorite way to go. So that's all I've got. Any questions or comments, come now. We'll cover all this again, and we'll cover leaving to New Zealand tomorrow and Thursday as well. More detail on Thursday. We'll just touch base tomorrow.
And I'll ask him to cover the NewCal area. There's a boat going to arrive from Oz about Thursday night, Friday, and we've got Code Blue and Malua coming in from the other direction sooner than that. So he'll do that now. And just a reminder, folks, that it is Fiji Day tomorrow. So it's a holiday in Fiji if you are a government worker. Here's David.
All right, the passage to New Caledonia from Oz is looking pretty good getting there on Thursday. The winds, well, I'm not sure what pass that you're going to get in, but it really doesn't matter because the winds are going to be southeasterly, and they'll be about 15 knots in that southeast. So not going to be an issue at all. Typically, once you get through the pass and you're trying to get into the port, The winds tend to funnel right in that area. They tend to run up and down the coast, and it winds up being a beat, even though it sounds like a decent wind direction. It winds up being a little difficult to do, if you will, but there are no real strong winds that I could see, so it should be fine. So have a good landfall, and we'll see if anything changes between now and then.
Any particular questions? I'm going to get David to repeat for Tonga, because evidently there was a bit of noise in Tonga about the strong high and the consideration of a Saturday departure from Tonga. That will be repeated now, but is there anything else that we need to cover? Nothing heard, so here's for the Tonga listeners.
Well, leaving Friday from Tonga.
Saturday.
Well,
Saturday.
You know, I've done this from Friday, so it doesn't make much difference one way or the other. On the Friday time frame, at least, we're looking at a northerly quadrant winds. Let's just see. I'll move it to Saturday since that's when apparently you want to go. So I'm not sure where you're leaving from, but anyway, from the bow down to the Hawaii's, the wind should be northerly quadrant, might even be north-northwest, about 15 knots. They're going to tend to continue to back to the northwest by later in the day. By midnight, there'll be a pretty good northwesterly direction. So really, that's not too bad at all. Now, depending upon whether you're stopping at Minerva or just heading on, that's up to you what you decide to do. But by Thursday, I'll just jump around a little bit since we're going to be covering it tomorrow. But by Thursday, if you're at about 25 south, you're going to be looking at light to variable winds. And like I mentioned to the folks earlier, probably a motor at that point, fairly light air, and that's due to the anticyclone that's in the area. By Friday, at 27 south, the following Friday, of course, you'll be in the cyclonic flow of the depression itself, the next one that's coming through. And that's expected to be over New Zealand at about that time as well. But the winds are going to be southwest 20 to 25 knots. By Saturday, the depression is going to be east of the North Island. And if you're at about 30 south by Saturday, about 30 south, you could expect southerly quadrant winds, and they're going to be about 25 knots or so. By Sunday, the winds are going to back by, I would say, south to south-southeast. They'll be 15 to 20, and you should be there by then. But if not, by Monday, closing on Cape Reinga, south to southeast winds about 10 to 15 knots. So that's the passage leaving Friday or Saturday from the Tonga area. And again, we'll cover it tomorrow and Thursday as well.
And looking at the satellite picture, the absolute pick of the South Pacific is the Loyalty Islands, and that is confirmed by Jan on Alcyon. He sent in an email, 10% cloud cover up there at Uvea, 6 knots from the east-southeast. So an absolutely glorious day in Uvea. I could just close my eyes and picture how beautiful it is up there. The bar is 1011. All right, folks, nothing much more from us. Nothing much has come through question-wise on streaming. Doesn't look very good down there in Fulanga, but at least they're listening to us. Good morning to you down there. You finally got the trough, which you were complaining about not getting. So that's about the news from here, and we will be back again tomorrow morning, same time, same place. So the frequency is now all yours. Cheers, everybody. We're clear.